DJI sent me an Air 3 early, and as somebody who's had time to use this thing all over the place, I do regret jumping to conclusions when they told me the hardware that's in this thing. The sensor is smaller than what was in the Air 2S. That was weird to me. It's got 2 cameras on it, but these are both 3/4 inch sensors versus the Air 2S, which had a 1-inch sensor. You would assume that means lower image quality, however, I am not finding that to be the case. I have side-by-sides to show you to make this pretty much concrete. Maybe this is just how technology goes, but with less hardware, they're managing to get a better image out of this thing. Even over the Mini 3 Pro, which was only like a year ago that thing came out. On top of some funny new additions, this was a weird one I didn't see coming, and I mean, they always manage to surprise me, so here we are. It's got a second camera on it that's almost equally powerful. Both of them shoot 10-bit Dlog-M, but that means they're 4K instead of 5.4K. Obstacle avoidance is better, it's heavier now. A 46-minute flight time, that is huge. Both cameras shooting 10-bit Dlog-M is cool, but being only 4K is a big change. One argument is that if you were using the 5.4 and just cropping in on a 4K timeline, well, now you have a better option with the telephoto. So compared to the Air 2S, some wacky changes with this one. 2 cameras at 12 megapixels instead of 1 camera at 20 megapixels. There's a much improved signal, a new smart remote. Vertical filming has been added, but that's a sensor crop. It's not like when the Mini 3 turns its head. The most important change isn't even listed though. It's the color profile, and I've been saying this for years. The Air 2S is cool, it's great, it shoots 5.4K footage, 20 megapixel photos, awesome. But it is the one drone in DJI's whole lineup that I'm not like really eagerly telling people to go get because of the color profile that was in that thing. I hated the way it looked. It's like half the time it looked fantastic, and then half the time it just looked Willy Wonka, bonkers, bananas. Exposure balancing was still in guinea pig phase. Immediately, this profile has been a massive breath of fresh air. The exposure balancing is way more similar to the Mini 3 Pro, so if you shoot in daylight, sunset, clouds, whatever, it just doesn't give you the weirdness that the Air 2S did, and even if there is less resolution and on a smaller sensor, it's managing to pull this off with ease. I'm not really coming across places where the dynamic range and the exposure balancing are just having a hard time where it's completely visible. Most of the drones in the past, aside from the Mavic 3, I've been able to find a spot where it was just like, okay, just avoid shooting in a spot like this. Haven't come across that with the Air 3. DJI specifically said to me that this drone has a better image on it than the Mini 3 Pro and the Air 2S, which to me, I'm like, yeah, okay, pal, we'll see about that. I mean, compared to the Air 2S at its best when it is working, 5.4K and a 1-inch sensor, I didn't see it beating that. So let's take a look, starting with this park in the daytime. This is a very low bar to start with because I don't care what drone you use, if it's in the daytime and it's less than a micro four thirds inch sensor on the drone, it's pretty much all gonna look the same. The Air 2S image is a wide lens. I have to zoom out so it fits because it's 5.4K footage. The shadows though, the black spots, color has a weird tint everywhere. It's like blues and greens are a tinge odd. Air 3, just overall, it's rich, even. This is approaching sunset too, so it's late in the afternoon, but shadows are not lost completely. If I toss in a Mini 3 Pro just for fun, I will say that the Air 3 does have it beat, and it feels more overall appealing. The shadows don't feel crazy gone. There's not super sharpness and contrast. Who cares about daytime footage of trees though? Here's the Air 2S footage in low light. And then with the same setup, here is the Air 3. This is insane to me. This is not even close. I mean, just like back and forth really quick, just to give you an idea. This camera is f1.7, but overall, I mean, it shouldn't be making that big of a difference, but this is kind of a lot. You can see here Air 2S barely exists at 100 ISO, while the Air 3 has a lot more presence. So even more bonkers, we can do the same thing with the Air 3 and the Mini 3 Pro. You'd think the same 4K sensor that's f1.7 would be similar, but it is not. I think the strongest suit of the Air 3 is that it has the most recent ISO, so if you look in the corner of the Air 2S, which is that's years old now, they've gotten a lot better at dealing with this stuff. There is a ton of data in all of this footage, so I know I can take it into Premiere Pro and raise some blacks and draw out some of what's in the shadows in this footage, adjust the shadows a little bit, and it looks a lot better. When I do that with the Air 2S though, you'd think that there would be something you can recover, but right away it starts to kind of fall apart and you just get the smokiness, so it's not recovering anything actual that was collected. It's like you're just trying to raise the brightness on what's pure black. Again, with the Mini 3 Pro, it helps. You can do it a little bit, but not that much, and it's not near as good as the difference you can make with the Air 3. As a professional editor and motion graphics artist for years for networks, I'll tell you exactly what's going on here. It's that I'm completely confused. I have no idea why the same equipment is making results that different. I didn't think it was going to be this noticeable having the same hardware, but it just goes to show that sometimes it really do be like that. I know a ton of people are going to see the specs and the sensor size and decide to just skip this one, and yes, you could keep your old Air 2S, but it does not have the second camera, and I'm starting to betray everyone and join the 2-camera crew because that is honestly a big deal. It was a really big deal while I was filming with this Air 3. I was using it a ton. Nobody cared about the second camera on the Mavic 3 at launch because it was a 7X. It was like the sensor was smaller. The image was just, when do you need to spot something that far away unless like the Huns are invading your borders and you need to light the signal fires? But a 3X, the 70mm look is very, very useful. So it's an equally powerful second camera because it's a 3/4 inch sensor. It also shoots in Dlog-M 10-bit, so that is useful. It's just better at compressing things into one field of view. It's like you're working with a painting instead of like a fisheye where you just kind of film Earth. I just can't overstate how dependent I became on this. Every time I was filming something, I would switch back and forth. It wasn't a feature I just tried. I started to like really enjoy it. I don't need them to get crazy and try and give me 3 or 4 lenses. Just a second one is fine. It's perfect. It's all I need. The one area the Air 2S does stand really solid ground on is photography. There's just a lot more usable stuff in a 5400 by 3600 image 20 megapixel raw photo than there is in 12 megapixel, which is 4000 by 3000. The Air 2S doesn't have the weird color profile stuff going on with the raw photos. They come out looking the way I would expect a raw photo to. So for photography, the Air 2S, phenomenal. Maybe not over the Air 3 because the Air 3 has that second lens option. That's a big deal. But for photography specifically, it is nice to have, and you're not an old man for having this drone. With most drones, my thing is shoot in normal because you're going to get 95% of the way there and then adjust. Thankfully, the Air 3 profile gets you close enough and you can adjust. However, with this 10-bit Dlog-M, this is the first time that I'm using a drone where just shooting the D-Log, applying the DJI LUT, gives you a look that I prefer over the normal profile. In a lighting extreme, let's take a look at this. Remember that the D-Log is going to be closer to the real world and a natural look. The color profile and exposure balancing isn't going to be screwing around. The D-Log looked much better here because those shadows are super important. However, 10 minutes later, when it was a little bit darker, the D-Log might have been exposed a little bit too dark, but the normal footage, even with its super deep shadows after adjusting, it has a lot more life in the shot. I think the exposure balancing is helping out a ton. So it is debatable. You could just shoot everything in that 10-bit D-Log and then apply the LUT, or you can do normal profile if you don't want to screw around with color grading and you're not confident in not messing things up. I shoot a ton of sunsets, so I will use the D-Log because the LUT is so simple to use. ActiveTrack is as simple as ever. You just draw over whatever object you want to trace, like a person on the screen. You just draw a square and it'll follow them. However, the Air 3 also lets you use smart features while you're doing ActiveTrack. So now the collision sensors are going to be on. They've had time to develop this feature now, so I want to know how good it is at tracking someone. So I'll see how long it can keep up with me. You can see it detecting these rocks while it's chasing me down the beach. I'm running here at about, I think, like 20% quick juke, 20% of my maximum output. It is really smooth when it follows you though. I was worried it was going to be harsh and jagged when it turns, but it's not. I'm just messing around here. This is not my full power. It's more for the drone to make sure that it works. While I was doing this, the craziest thing, I saw somebody I knew at the beach. It's like, I almost had it too with that one, but it caught the back of my head at the end. So to me, it was more like a thing about having, like, not warming up. This was really early in the morning too. This is like 3 in the morning that I'm out here doing this. So it does meet my standards. You can also control the distance, like how far away you want to keep it, or the angle, and there's multiple modes. Again, I have the prototype, so it might be faulty. I don't know why I couldn't shake this drone. I can typically do that at 60% power. I can see that I'm wearing this drone down though after using it like this for a little while, so I'm gonna give it a break. How noisy is this compared to the Mini 3 Pro? Take 2, Mini 3 Pro. There's really nothing behind this. My bro science is loud and less loud. That's kind of what, I guess this really wasn't necessary. For photography, I always have kind of a lazy summary for these things because it really is more up to the talent of the photographer. There are tons of tricks and a workaround for basically every situation and constraint you have in photography, so it's more up to you learning those. I can see the 3X being a really big deal though for photography specifically because of the compression it allows and the way you can fit everything into one image. Like if there's a mountain far away, it feels a lot taller and you can feel the horizon being absorbed into the height of the mountain when you can fit all of it into one field of view. You can also zoom into places you're not allowed to get that you get that close to and fit everything into the field of view. Or you can do like some espionage, like you can finally figure out if it's your neighbor's kids who keep throwing corn in your yard. Why is there corn constantly? All the tricks are there, panoramics, raw photos. You can do tons with this thing. I just want to really emphasize it's 12 megapixels. It's not 48 megapixels. I don't care what it's being listed as. It's like when you go to get your double stuffed Oreos and it turns out that there's half a serving in each cookie, so it winds up being 180 calories, not 90 calories. I can't keep losing parts of my day I depend on. So yeah, it's not 48 megapixels, it's 12. It's a 12 megapixel sensor. Cell phone companies do this a lot. They use something called quad Bayer. It sounds great in marketing. It splits all the pixels into 4 mini pixels. The sensor is small enough that it doesn't really matter. You can't really discriminate between the two photos, bottom line. I mean, otherwise it would look like this. You're talking about 48 megapixels versus 12. There is a 2% sharper difference on the bigger photo, but it's also like 4 times the file size. It's like 36 megabytes. Stick to regular photos, but f1.7 is a pretty bright lens that is very handy, and I feel the difference when I'm shooting in low light. You would only need 20 megapixels if you are already a skilled photographer shooting in RAW format. You know how to do all the tricks. Otherwise, buy this one and get 12 megapixels, and then once you learn how to use this thing till you hit the ceiling, then worry about getting 20 megapixels. If you're just using JPEGs, like taking it straight from the camera, it won't notice the difference. 70 millimeters opens up a new world of fun. You can drive all over town just finding new perspectives. Really, it's your call if that's a huge thing that buys into your buying decision, because if you shoot events or you shoot weddings, yeah, this is going to be super helpful. Are you just doing real estate? No, don't worry about it that hard. The example against the Air 2S was not using night mode. That was just me doing whatever setup I wanted to so that they're all even. But yes, night mode will have better shadows, a different black point, better ISO. The low light is the biggest difference between this and the Mini 3 Pro. The Air 3 is doing a much better job even with the same sensor size. And of course, editing the color helps tremendously in a situation like this. The 3x lens is f2.8, but I didn't notice a huge difference. Then again, they're different angles, so what do I know? Better than I thought. The D-Log versus the normal profile in low light, I don't see a big enough difference to justify all the D-Log work. It will be faster for me to just shoot normal profile and then edit that in Premiere Pro. Range test, here's your range test. There's a boat that's way over there. I'm gonna fly to it. That's the end. I don't need to deliver contraband over the border. I don't know why you people care so much about this. If I can fly for a couple miles anywhere in a circle around me, I'm gonna be okay. The Air 3 does have a much better reception though than the one before it, as if that wasn't good enough already. So it's less prone to like obstruction if there's trees between you and the drone or something. So take that whatever you will with it. I don't know. The hyperlapse quality is a photography dependent thing, so a bigger sensor and 20 megapixels would have helped here. Like the Mini 3 Pro though, this doesn't look bad. Fun fact, hyperlapses are my stock footage that sells the best. Yours won't look like this though, because I do mine a special way. I use the raw photos in Adobe Lightroom to edit them. This is the video that is made inside of the app for you from the drone. This is a brighter lens too. It's f1.7 and I definitely noticed that. You can also do a hyperlapse with the long lens. It's a 3x at f2.8, so it'll be a little bit darker. I do have to give DJI credit that these have improved big time. They used to look so jambly, jankly, now it's a lot cleaner, it's more stable. Remember, it's the tiny processor in the drone and the phone, so it's not going to be as good as if you made it yourself, but it is good that they have come this far. DJI thankfully is now very good about having ND filters at the launch of their drones. You used to have to wait a couple months to get them like on Amazon aftermarket stuff, and they look cooler every time. I just want to collect them and care for them, put them in the light. There is a new smart remote that comes with this. Nothing significant is different compared to the DJI RC. For the most part, everything is the same. It's got 2 antennas on top. I'm sure there's internal things that have changed, but I can't tell. There is a really cool feature on this battery hub. If you click twice and hold down the power button, it redistributes the power. So the stronger battery will sacrifice its weaker brothers and it'll suck the power out of them so that you have one full battery instead of a bunch of weak ones, which is such a good idea because of how many times I've had 30% batteries and not been able to use any. Vertical filming, that is a sensor crop. So it's not as exciting as when the Mini 3 Pro's head turns sideways and you get full 4K. It's just going to crop in on the image, but at least you get 2.7K. That's probably the trade for having 2 cameras on there, is that it's too heavy or shaped different to have a rotating head. I think they saw how excited people were for the rotating head just because it's so cool, and they don't want to come out with a new drone that has absolutely no answer for that framing. So for people who are focused on social media stuff, they just want to give you something so that you can frame it that way from the start are to keep in mind. So that was the big question for people. Should you replace your Air 2S with an Air 3, or should you pick the Air 3 over an Air 2S if it's like on sale? The Air 3, I don't see anything that I would rather have an Air 2S over. I also want to say, remember, battery life is a massive plus. 46 minutes flying in the air. It's like, feels like a Mavic 3. You can get 2 flights out of this thing. You're not constantly looking at the battery thinking it's going to plunge to 0 and fall out the sky. Not to mention a second camera, and there are reasons. I mean, photographers would commit to that specifically, just being able to have a telephoto lens in the air at the focal length that we all wanted from the beginning, not like a 19x or whatever. 70 millimeters on this telephoto lens, 3x is perfect. But if we're talking bodies, the Air 3 is bigger. I mean, it's not the size of the Mavic 3 like you can see here, but it would be annoying taking it on the hike. The Air 2S though was already at the point of being annoying to take on a hike. However, I'm slow and I hate hiking. The Mini 3 Pro was at a point where it's unnoticeable. That fits in your pocket. So yeah, the disparity between all these, they're all convenient, but you will notice the difference sitting in the Air 3 next to an Air 2S. If you are absolutely bottom line, just focused on quality, go get a Mavic 3 Classic. For a little bit more money, 5.1K sensor, micro four thirds, you got basically the best image on the drone market. That thing can't be beat. You don't get a second camera though. Otherwise, yes, Air 3 over Air 2S, no regrets. A tougher question, would I pick this over the Mini 3 Pro? On instinct, I wanted to say no, because I don't want my Mini 3 Pro to be on YouTube later and see this, and then we're up till 2 a.m. fighting about this. The Mini 3 Pro is just such a freaking unbelievably cool drone. It's everything about it is fun, it's small, it's unnoticeable, it's not super noisy. Quality-wise, bottom line, yeah, the picture profile, the low light, having a second camera rocks, so yes, I do choose it over the Mini 3 Pro. But the price difference and the size difference, is it just for fun? Mini 3 Pro is still the most fun drone in the world, in my opinion. My wildest fantasy would be to get a micro four thirds 5.1K main camera and a micro four thirds 5.1K 3x telephoto camera, and have both of those together on a Mavic 4. If that ever became a thing, I would certainly pre-order, but first I would a brick. You'll hear me say it in other videos. I teach a course on cinematography and editing. I've said it a billion times if you're in there. Learning simple cinematography and framing tricks is your fastest, easiest, quickest way to improve dramatically. Looking for the right lighting conditions, like just before sunset and facing perpendicular to the sun with a 3/4 inch sensor like this, is a huge help. Having a second lens, but also a second quality lens, gives you all those framing options and a lot more capabilities. You only need a second battery, in my opinion, one to charge in the car while you're flying, and then when you're done flying that one, you can swap them out. A discount's in the description for my course, but it is for serious editing and making money with your drone, so don't get in there unless you're ready for that. Fly your drone first to see if you have like a knack or a liking to this kind of thing. Get some ND filters so you have smoother looking video, and for the love of God, get a freaking lens cloth and wipe your lens. The amount of people who complain about 6K versus 4K and then fly with this nasty, grimy meth house lens and see no problem with it. It's unbelievable. Wipe the lens off before you fly every time. That's it. Go away.